All right, all right. Looks like we have a really good group again. Thanks everyone for showing up. Really excited about today's session. We have a lot to get done, and this one is going to be really interactive. We have a few exercises that we're going to go through. So this is Proven Strategies for Startup Fundraising. This is the second part of a three-part series. If y'all haven't registered for part 3, and last time, I think Anna had asked me a little bit about my fundraising fellowship. I want to let people know that this is something that I will be doing. People can figure out what that is by going to fundraisewithconfidence.com. But this 3-part series is meant to give as much value as I can, because not everyone wants to join the full fellowship. But if you all want to check that out, try fundraisewithconfidence.com. Okay, great. Let's go on to the actual content. So just quickly in housekeeping, this is going to be an interactive and action-oriented event. Like I've said before, we're going to have some exercises, so make sure you keep your cameras on. To get started, I'd asked last time where people were calling in from. I'd love for you guys to send through the chat what cities you're in, but also next to it, put down the name of your startup. I'd love to see those names. Go ahead and send through. Chicago, Strong Therapy, very cool. LA, Mexico City, New York, San Francisco. Very cool. Love the international crew. And of course, please ask questions throughout this whole thing. We're going to have time for Q&A at the end, but the interactivity is really what I think helps people learn. I think when you hear people problem solve live, you can extrapolate it and attach to what you're doing. So let's keep that interactivity alive. And if you see any insights that you really love, feel free to screenshot it. Feel free to share on social. And follow up with me afterwards. My name is @JYay on pretty much every social platform. And if you like LinkedIn too, I'm happy to connect with you all. But if you connect with me on LinkedIn, please put in your note that you found me through my workshop, or you came to my workshop, because I don't like accepting completely random people. And I get a lot of requests on a daily basis. Okay. Awesome. So for people that are new, I just want to give this introduction again, not because I'm trying to show what I've done necessarily, but really because I want to give people context for how I've come up with these frameworks, how I've come up with the approaches that I have. I spent most of my career in technology. I was a venture capitalist at Greycroft, where I saw probably thousands of decks and pitches, and was part of 50 to 100 financings, anywhere from a first check-in all the way to Series B, Series C, and we had companies go public. So I've seen that whole spectrum. Afterwards, I was a venture-backed startup. I was a co-founder and CEO of a company called Tape. We raised a couple $1 million from Greylock up north, so one of the best investors in the country, I think. And so know that process from that side of the table as well. We had a small exit in 2020. And afterwards, I really focused and shifted over to doing this, which is trying to make fundraising easier and more accessible to as many people as possible, because news alert, it's a really crappy process. And even someone like me with my background had a lot of struggles around it, and went through a lot of pain. And I want to make sure that people have the right education and support to get this done in the best way possible. So that's what I do through Adamant Ventures. That's what I'm doing through Fundraise with Confidence and my podcast Funded. All right, let's get into the real content now. So why are we here? Well, we're here because you all are running businesses that you believe need venture capital, that deserve venture capital. And that venture capital is really important. It's going to be the lifeblood of your business. And this is kind of like what I went through with everyone last time, which is this common fundraising story. And the reason I go through this is because it's so important to hammer this into people's heads. I don't know how many pieces of advice I didn't follow as a younger person that I wish were hammered into me over and over again. So it's worth saying again that this is the common story, that you guys have a great team, a great vision, a great product. You know you need money to continue to build more product, to capture the market, to grow out a better, even better team. But as a venture-backed business, and a venture-backed CEO, keeping your company capitalized is going to be one of the most important jobs that you have. Because if you fail in the best case scenario, you'll just slow down. And maybe you'll figure it out. I'll ask founders what happens and they say, I'll try to figure it out. But the reality is you should be thinking about this. Like, if you're not good at this and you can't get better at this, then the dream will end. And the most common fundraising mistake I see people make is really this idea that founders don't put enough into the preparation for this really, really important thing that they have to do every couple of years. Okay, so we'd love to start a poll and really get a better sense for where people are in their fundraising journey. Jonathan, if you could launch the poll. We're just going to see where everyone is in their fundraising process, from not fundraising to, we're actually doing it right now. So poll's coming out. We're going to give it another, call it 15 seconds, try to get everyone to respond. Great. So this is a big crew of fundraising now and about to start. A lot of people seem to be getting ready to fundraise, which is great. I'm glad that you're getting smarter about this. But what we had talked about last time is this graph of effort around getting ready to fundraise. People figure out that they need to fundraise and they're like, okay, I kind of think I need to do something, and then lull until right about now when this 57% of people are fundraising. Start ramping up what they're doing. Okay. So what I talked about last time is that this is more of a graph of like insufficient effort. And there's a reason for this, a thing that I talked about, which I'm again hammering into people's minds so that you spend more time on this. What we really probably realize, and hopefully you guys are realizing, is that for the people that think that they're 1 to 2 months out, maybe you're more like 2 to 3 months out because you have a lot of work to do. And the people that are fundraising now, depending on your situation, you might actually be doing things that are more akin to like warming up things and prepping the market for yourself and getting yourself ready to like get your deck in a great position. Because, what we realize is that when you don't know all the things that go into fundraising and preparing to fundraise, you as humans are going to avoid the work because the human mind is incredibly averse to uncertainty and ambiguity. That is the really big problem we have here, which is why you attend events like these. This is why you do more research and why you find more people to give you advice around this stuff. So that's my encouragement to everyone. This right here between today and when you actually kick off and fundraise, when you actually start executing a really great, tight process, is your chance to maximize the power of your narrative, your network, and your influence. If you don't do that pre-work to get as many of those gears turning, like, you're going to start fundraising and go through a really painful process that, if you are successful, will probably be extended way too long and be much more painful than it actually has to be. So this is my encouragement to you for like putting in pre-work into getting ready to fundraise. This is how you close the gap between yourself and someone who's a much more experienced fundraiser. Okay. So let's talk about this last graph, this last illustration. We are trying to transition you to poke as many holes and shine as many lights on this black box of fundraising as possible. Don't be that person that doesn't ask for help. Don't even be that person that just asks for a little bit of help and then tries to figure it out on their own and wing it, start the fundraising, just wing it. Be that person that puts in a lot of effort, that asks for a lot of help and does a lot of research to really figure out what to do. If you can shine more light on what you're going to do, the transformation will be, oh, I know what has to happen. Now let's create a timeline and actually get all that stuff done so that when we go fundraise, we're ready to go and feel tight and confident about it. Okay. So last thing before we get into the hardcore work is my inspirational quote from Abraham Lincoln. Given 6 hours to chop down a tree, I would spend the first 4 sharpening my axe. Okay. So really think about when you want to fundraise, or if you think you're fundraising now, and whether or not you want to spend a little bit of time or as much time as you can preparing so that fundraise runs well. Okay, so let me check some notes. Also one reminder, I did see a lot of people from Latitude join on last one. And I think a lot of the Latin American founders here are coming from Latitude. So shout out to Latitude. What a great program. Glad to see you guys joining this. Really fun to see nice faces and memorable names. Okay, so today's agenda. We are going to cover a couple of the most highly requested questions around fundraising to answer, which is for good reason, narrative and deck, and investor targeting. How do we connect with and identify the investors that we will pitch, and how we do that successfully. In between, we are going to pick up the topic that we ended with in part one, which was help and support. And then we're going to reserve about 15 minutes for open Q&A so that we can all learn from live problem solving. So narrative and deck. Let's talk about why this is so important. Your narrative and deck is really that piece of cheese that you're going to trap investors with. It's so important because what I tell people is you might be on the back of a napkin. You might have launched a product. You might even have customers. You might even have a year of customers. But what people maybe don't realize is that investors quite understand that whatever you're telling me will likely change. Whatever numbers that you tell me cannot be extrapolated to infinity. And because of that, all you have is this story that you tell. All you have is this narrative around why you, Ryan, are the person that we need to back. Why you, Andrew, are working on something that's really compelling, and because of the story you tell, gets me as an investor excited about backing you. So you may or may not think that creating a narrative and working on your deck and iterating on it is important, but it is really, really important. Here are some facts. This has been changing from pre-pandemic to in the middle of the pandemic to post-pandemic, but more or less the data that DocSend has around how much time an investor spends on a deck is somewhere between 2.5 and 3.5 minutes. It's a really short amount of time. And the takeaway from that is not that like decks aren't important. The takeaway from that is that decks need to be incredibly clear, concise, and impactful to be able to make an impact on someone that's only spending 2.5 to 3 minutes on a deck. So the only way you get to something that works like that is through iteration, through feedback, and through actually learning about some of these frameworks. So kudos to you guys for joining this session. So let me tell you about a couple common mistakes, anecdotes that I've heard. So I talked to a founding team that is working in the grocery space, the fresh grocery delivery space. And I wonder if said founder is even in here, but maybe he'll giggle because I gave him this feedback. I remember getting the very first deck and seeing like pages of financial models around where this would go and how far it would take them and where their costs would be and their burn and the margin profiles and all this stuff. And the overwhelming amount of data was interesting because at the end of it, I was like, so wait, how old is this company? And how many locations are you in? How many customers do you have? And the answer was actually the company hadn't launched yet. The company hadn't launched yet, but I was being overwhelmed with tons of minutia and data around where this would be and how the business would run when it hadn't even launched yet. So there's this common mistake of trying to overpower an investor and show sophistication with data and additional details, when in fact, especially and we saw in the poll last time, more than 50% of you are raising pre-seeds or seeds. And there just isn't a lot of substantial data at that point. The other side of it, not the other side, a close cousin to this is the founder that tries to add so many like just slides and details on slides, again, in order to show credibility, in order to maybe convince an investor with a thump factor. So if any of you have been management consultants, which I feel like a lot of you have, you understand that idea of like coming to your client with a 50 slide deck to show them that you did the work. That's actually going to shoot yourself in the foot when it comes to creating a really great narrative. In fact, this is my opinion, but When I see people that put way more content into their deck than is necessary, I actually don't think to myself, that founder is incredibly competent and knows what they're doing. I think to myself, this founder isn't confident in what they're doing, because they're trying to, they don't feel like the 10 slides that capture the very specific thing that they're doing is enough. And so they're stretching and they're like overselling, and they're like, well, let me tell you about this. Let me tell you about this research that we've done. Let me tell you about more and more and more. The goal is to actually be able to convince someone in a very tightly formed deck. So these are two common mistakes and anecdotes that I see a lot of. Okay. So what should it feel like? Just looking at my notes here. This is the process that we're going to go through around narrative development. You're trying to tell a story that your audience, the investor, can really listen to and kind of dream alongside you with. Like, think about Gilad talking about the future of the pet industry, and whether I have a pet or not, you know, can he bring me along and help me go on this journey and get excited about, oh, this is what's happening. This is the possibility, and kind of like be a co-conspirator. There's this concept that I love about, you're not trying to find people that will invest in you. You're trying to find people that will be your co-conspirator and be like, oh, I see this, and dream alongside you. Okay. And that work that I would highly encourage you guys to is not only important because getting to the final product of a great deck that influences people is obviously like almost everything. But I actually think that work, that journey of iterating on deck is so powerful for the actual business, because what you're going to try to do is take the idea you have for a deck and like whittle it down and cut out the fat and really get to the core. And when you're doing that for the story that you're telling, you're kind of also doing that for yourself. Like, focus is so important in a startup. You need to be doing things that say like, is this part of the story that I want to tell or not? And if it's not part of the story that I want to tell, does it make sense for us to even spend time and resources and mental capacity on that in the company itself? So don't sleep on working on your deck. It's like, yes, it's going to be 10 to 15 slides at the end of the day, and feel like something you were just doing for this 2 months to pitch investors. But that work is going to be incredibly important. So like, spend time on it. So let's get into things about the deck. I want to talk about very specific components that you guys need to understand, and some of the mistakes that people make, so that you can start creating a better deck. But first, let's run the poll and see where people are in their deck building process. This will help me define some of the homework that you guys should do and the exercises that will make you better. Jonathan, there we go. So how's your deck looking? Amazing. A lot of you are iterating on your deck, which I love seeing. Let's share the results. Okay, so 65% of you have gone through multiple iterations, which is fantastic. And the people that haven't, don't worry about that either. You have time to keep working on it. And by the way, the people that have gone through multiple iterations, I think you should know that even if you're out there pitching, like, this is a living document, right? This is a living thing that gets better over time, that gets better as you get smarter about your business, that gets better as you get feedback from smart people. Some of them might be investors even. Not all investors are super smart, but they will have insights for you. Okay. So let's talk about it. What is a deck? So we talked about creating a great narrative, understanding your story, exciting people. The deck to me is a slide-by-slide representation, translation of that narrative. Okay. So we're going to do everything we can to translate this really fantastical story into something that can be consumed really quickly, that can be sent out and shared, that can be used as an organizing vehicle as you live pitch, especially over Zoom. So what is it not? I really believe a deck is not a checklist. There are some resources online that you'll see, which are like DocSend, who's a partner of mine, and I love the technology. And I encourage everyone to use DocSend to protect themselves and allow them to dynamically change slides. But they run data against decks, and they think the perfect slide is like 18 to 24 slides long. And my vision is 10 to 12. And in the 18 to 24, they'll like tell you very specific slides that go into it. I've seen blog posts about the 12 slides that go into a Sequoia deck, a deck that Sequoia really likes. But my thing is, if the deck is just a translation of your story, then it's not a checklist. It's not, it isn't that the case that Alejandro's deck is going to look exactly like Augustine's or like Nancy's, because their businesses are very different and their stories are very different. It isn't to say like, you're not like, okay, problem slide. When I look at a deck, I'm not like, okay, problem slide, solution slide, what's the product, why now, what's the team slide, market competition, projections, the ask. Like, I'm not saying, okay, you got those 10, Woody checked 10 of the boxes, I'm investing in him. It's not like that at all. And so you need to separate yourself from like this checkbox mentality and more, can I actually tell a story that get people to lean in? And the mistake that people make after that is thinking, well, like it's kind of like this exhaustive checklist plus I need to make sure that I tell everything in it. The mistake people make is that they think that the deck is their entire pitch, that the deck is there to close the round or close the funding, close the deal. When actually the deck is meant to represent your story, in my belief, and get an investor excited to ask more questions, to actually like lean in and to think more. And in fact, like I believe that if, William, if you pitch somebody and they're leaning in, they're nodding, and then they're like, well, what does your year two look like? That isn't, oh my God, William, you screwed up. Like you didn't put year two in your deck. That's like, hey, you won. Like that person is positively leaning in and asking for more detail, right? Like you were able to tell the story in a really concise way without cluttering it with financial projections. And now they're asking for it. By the way, what I'm saying, I'm not saying financial projections don't work for every deck. Sometimes like the financial projections kind of tell a story and then it goes in the deck. But all I'm saying is that we're going to tell different stories, and we're going to tell the tip of the iceberg story to get people more excited. Okay. The other mistake that I make, and maybe this is flipped, but the mistake is on the right side. So this is the choose your own adventure deck that I see a lot of people do, which is to say, my name is Patrick. I have this company. It's very interesting. I know that when I talked to Jason, he said that he really liked marketplaces. But then when I talked to Sarah over at GFC, she thought that there was an opportunity for SMB sales. So I'm going to put like a slide in here that says a little bit of marketplace, a little bit of SMB sales, because for the people that wanted the marketplace stuff, it's in there. And for the people that wanted the SMB sales, it's also in there. And that's actually a really big mistake. The moment you try to be everything to everyone, you become this like copacetic, kind of dull, watered down story that is fine for most people, but not exciting for anyone. And you do not want that. You don't want to be everything for everyone. You want to tell a very specific story that is a very specific treasure map of what you think the world is like and how it works, and know that that's not going to be for everyone. Okay. You have to know that you're going to get no's. You have to be ready for no's. And your goal isn't to get everyone to be like, yeah, John, that was kind of cool. Like, okay, like, we'll get back to you. Like that is not what you want. You want people being like, John, that was crazy. John, that was crazy. John, that was crazy. Whoa, John, I've thought about that before. Like that's super interesting. Okay. So we're going to tell a very specific story that drives towards a very specific outcome. So let's start talking about narrative frameworks. Okay. We're going to start talking about narrative frameworks. And I took a selection of them that I think are just kind of powerful to think about. So this first one is called believer matching. I'd love to one set the stage for this, which is like when I talk to founders, they and I'll use Gilad as an example just because I saw the name and I kind of remember what you do, kind of. But Gilad would be like, come to me, and I've never talked to him live, but he would probably say, I'd ask him like, who are you raising from, and like, is it difficult? He might be like, it's really difficult. We're doing this pet business, and if I could just find that investor that grew up with 5 cats and 5 dogs, had 3 of them die along the way, and then in college had a dog that lived for 12 years, and then after that, is now owns a puppy. If I could find that specific investor, that investor would totally get it. They would totally get it. And my response to these types of founders is like, okay, yeah, let's go try to find that believer. And so before I like kind of tell everyone what that is, if you think that what your believer looks like, it doesn't have to be that long story. Can you send it through? Because I kind of want to like speak to this. Send it through the chat. Like just give a sentence. Like what do you think your perfect investor that would know your business would do? And while that's going through, as people think, I'll give you guys 30 seconds to send some stuff through. There is a question about appendices that does not include appendix. One of my answers to people is, how long should a deck be? I'm always like, about infinity slides long, because I say 10 slides long and then an infinity long appendix. So it's like, if it doesn't make it into the 10 slides, we throw it into the appendix. So that was a question from Sohel. Okay. Someone that plays tennis regularly. That's from Ganesh. Travis, food lovers. Okay. So this is great. So what I tell people is, I would say, Ganesh, let's go look for every investor that plays tennis, that loves tennis, for sure. We should do that. But that's not our goal. Like, our goal is to convince everyone. And so what does that mean? Well, you need to think about, Ganesh, what makes that investor a believer? Like, what about them makes them your champion, your superhero? So you're going to like zoom in on that and think about that. Well, what is it about playing tennis regularly that they know? And if we're to get people to kind of come along this journey and really enjoy this story with you, what you'll do is kind of like distill those things and try to put them into your deck in a way that will bring the lowest common denominator up into a place where everyone's like, oh, okay, like I don't play tennis, but like, oh, I didn't know that tennis players like regularly have to like compete for court time, or like wish they could spend money on private lessons because one private lesson changes enjoyment by 90% or something like that. Now, not every company or story will need all this like ramp up or whatever, but it's something interesting to think about around what you put in your deck, and sometimes what you put into your opening pitch and how you talk to people, like an opening conversation, to like just make sure that people are on the right wavelength before they're consuming your deck. So that's believer matching. So think about that. Next, the nod along effect. So this is a concept for how you stage out your deck and how it reads, how you tell it. And this is another reason why I don't like the formula decks. That's like, this is the first slide, this is the second slide. By the way, does anyone know the answer to when you should put the team slide into your deck? Where does the team slide go? You can, whatever.
It's like one of the first 3 slides, right?
Oh, good. I'm glad someone answered. That was like a red herring question. It matters. It really matters, honestly. Like, because what you're trying to think about in your head is like very much this. So let me just go into this. When I think about the nod along effect, what I'm doing is like, okay, let me put something out there that is like, okay, get them to nod along. They understand. Let me like put something else out there. Let's get that nod going. Let's get this momentum going where people are like, huh. And by the end of it, they're like, ooh, I want to know more. Like, this all makes sense. breaking the not alone effect is like you start telling them stuff and then you get to a point where it's like maybe they're confused, like overly complicated slide or something that's really controversial that a lot of people don't agree with, or maybe there's just too many words, or like a slide is just like too complicated. And so they have to stare at it. The moment you break momentum is the moment you kind of like lose someone's focus to keep going. It's really going back to that like 2.5 minute mark of people need to go, oh, yep. I want to talk to Travis. Like I want to spend more time with Travis. And the answer about the team slide is it works everywhere. Like I've seen people qualify and put the believer matching in by putting them in the very first slide, because like, it's like, look at me, look at what I've done before and look at my expertise. And it leads right into this story. I've seen it go where it's like, let me tell you about the pet market. It's a big problem here. And oh, by the way, I've owned 100 dogs in my lifetime. You're like, oh shit, like that's pretty interesting. And I've seen it, happen at the end where it's like the story is moving, it's moving. And then it's like, oh my God, Andrew Mail is doing this business. Wow. Like that's amazing. So the point is you're really trying to build momentum in a deck so that people get excited about what's going on. Okay. This is more technical, or this is more just like tactical operational about how you build slides. One of the biggest pet peeves for investors, and you can Google this, I'm sure it comes up, is when they don't understand what's happening, or like, what is the slide? I don't get it. And this happens when people are like, founders are too close to the business. So they'll like add a lot of detail. And one way to get around this, like this is like a hack to like, I'll probably look at your deck and still say, cut out tons of words. But if you follow slide title narration as a way you build a slide, like you might fix a lot of problems. And you don't have to build all slides like this, but this is what slide title narration looks like. So this is a deck. Clear communication in decks is vital. So using the biggest text on a slide is powerful, as it leaves little doubt around what you're trying to say. Okay, that's an example of slide title narration, where it's like, this is what, if they didn't have any time to get through it, they were just running through this, they would get to that. They would actually get the concept. Okay, so we are going to do a rubber band exercise. A rubber band exercise is this, like, so you have a rubber band and we're trying to get you to move in a certain direction. We're trying to get you to be better around certain skills. And so in order to get there, we're going to stretch you beyond where you are, and stretching it won't be reality. But when we let go, the rubber band will kind of go back into place and be a little bit better. So we talked about this idea that decks should be very simple, right? Like focused and simple. I always tell people they should have a 10 slide target. And, if the deck gets a little bit bigger and goes 11, 12, 13 slides, that's fine. I'm not like, you can't have any more than 10 slides. I'm just like 10 slide target. So the rubber band exercise is to say, gun to your head, you only have 5 slides to sell me, to get me excited. What would that be? What would those 10 slides be? And on each slide, set something up. On each slide, could you only use 10 words? And if those 10 words and 5 slides were all you had, what would it be? So I'm going to put 5 minutes on the clock. I want people to spend the next 5 minutes just doing this work. Great. Okay. Let's stop this. I see some cool people's. Actually, Daniel, are you available to come off mute really quick?
Would that be me or somebody else?
Daniel Downs. Is that Daniel? About the military? Sorry, I didn't realize there were multiple Daniels. Hello. Hey, Daniel, how are you?
I'm doing well, my man. Yeah. So so full disclosure, I've done this exercise before, and my deck is like a little optimized, but yeah, happy to chat.
Here's where I'd press you.
Sure.
So I'll read this really quickly. Transitioning out of the military is a grueling process that pushes veterans into joblessness. The journey takes the pain out of the process. We built a platform. Our secret sauce connects candidates. Amazing. Very cool. So this is great for me to react to because I can tell you the two main things that I'm like, with 5 slides, I would really, really need to know who your team is. Like, why are you going to be the group that actually gets this done? And you only put 4 slides in there. You're trying to flex a little bit. And then I would want to know, why is this a big business? Like, why is this going to be a big business? So the cool thing about that is I told you 2 concepts. You had 4 slides. You could probably get a really compelling deck done in 6 slides. I'm not going to say you should keep it to 6 slides, but the point is really, it's much easier to start at a really small, like concise story and say like, okay, well, like if you gave me a little bit more room, like how would I make it a little bit more compelling? And how would I make it a little bit more compelling as opposed to 18 slides? And I tell you like, oh, you got to cut this out. You got to cut this down to 10. Then it's like, well, I don't know. Like this was, how it started. It's much harder to do. So Daniel, good stuff. I actually thought that was a really compelling way to think about it. I would take what you've written, this rubber band exercise, and get the same feedback. Like it's actually way easier to send bullet points like this to people and just send it to a bunch of people. See what some people that are startup founders, some people that are investors, some people that are advisors, you could send that an email and just be like, hey, can you do a quick read of this and tell me like what like is confusing or what you would need to know? It's a really good way to like not be confused by like how badly designed your deck is and to get a little bit more insight how you tell the story much more powerfully. Okay. Then those without a deck, use the rubber band exercise to start and build up from there. Those with a deck, I would compare the two and be like, are these things really necessary? Okay. So we're going to go into help and support. This is a tweet that I shared last time, but really internalize this. No one wins on their own. No matter what you hear in the media. And because of that, people that here are overachievers, people that know that they can solve problems on their own, stop doing that and get ready to ask for tons of help and ask people for questions. It's the only way you get this done really, really well. Okay. So the first thing I would say around help and support, start thinking about building your network. Even if you're fundraising right now, if you're building a venture-backed business, this is not the last time you're going to fundraise. And the reason I was able to be successful really in a quick and targeted way, or as quickly as possible and with the least amount of pain, still a lot of pain, is that I had a huge network. And part of that is this approach of building a network of saying that I want to figure out how I'm helpful and meet people and then be helpful. The easiest hack to this is how can you be someone that people want to meet? Like how can you be someone that people are excited to meet and excited to introduce to other people? So think a lot about that. Okay. We are getting to the end. As we wrap up, I know you guys might have meetings. Part 3 is actually this Sunday. And I realize that it's a Sunday, but we're trying to get this all in. It'll be at 2 p.m. Pacific time. And this is how we're all going to bring it together. So you have a story now. We have at least the starting point for a great concise story with the rubber band exercise. You're going to create your list of supporters and target investors. So that's going to be how you start mapping your way into the right investors. But really the last piece of it is, how do you execute a great process? I have an essay on calendar density. I have this whole approach and belief and philosophy around how you execute a great process to make investors move. We're going to talk about how to set that up. So that's going to be the conclusion of our 3-part series. I hope to see you guys there. Please register for it. Again, this is a lot of work. This is stuff that you should be putting in months of time in advance to actually get right. So let's see. We have questions coming through. So John, how are you, man?
Doing good. How about yourself?
Good to talk to you again. Thanks for being so interactive during these sessions.
Of course. And appreciate, I always walk out feeling a little bit smarter after engaging with you. So thank you. Still have a ways to go. But just wanted to see, so I have built connections in the pre-accelerator program and met people, but how do I ask for like a referral, or how do you play that game? It feels like a courtship almost.
Totally. I mean, the best way to approach these things are not shotguns. So I'll tell you the best, like not a shotgun ask, shotgun wedding. I'll tell you the best, and then I'll tell you like what you're probably being faced with. The best situation would be that you've met these people and that you're able to demonstrate why you're credible and why you're valuable, and even give them help. Because getting a request for an introduction is not easy. You know, you would, they have to put a little bit of their credibility on the line to make an introduction. Now, in a short-term scenario, I would talk to them and say like, hey, like, obviously try to warm it up, try to be helpful where you can. If you don't have a ton of time, you can be straight with them and say, look, I'm actually about to get into this fundraise. I saw that you're connected to John Lee at Adamant Ventures. I would love to be connected there. Is there anything I can do to help you like make that connection? And of course, I'd love to be helpful to you as well, and have that in your mind of how do you add value to them. So acknowledge that it's a big ask. It can be a big ask, and then always try to be valuable if you can. And that's how I would do the short-term like ask to try to get the right recommendation in. Okay.
All right.
Augustine, you have your hand raised too. Love to hear what you might.
Thanks, Jason, and thanks for your time. Just a quick question. What are your thoughts on including traction and unit economics on like not a pre-revenue startup, but one startup that it's only starting out? Of course, if these metrics would be good, they'll be, it makes a ton of sense to have them in a slide. But if you're just starting out, you're pre-product market fit, you've been focusing on nailing your product and not on growth, it probably looks pretty bad. So what are your thoughts on just ignoring that part in your deck?
Yeah, I mean, there's a way to tell basic traction as a story. And I would say if it doesn't add to the story, then take it out. But, you know, as a pre-product market fit company, some of the things that you might be trying to tell in your story is that we're great executors, and we're not, you know, we're shipping, right? We're not like waiting to get things perfect. So look at what experiments we've run, or like, look at what we've done. We've actually shipped product. We have this customer, whatever. These people have churned, but we made this iteration and we learned this insight. So traction may not be as much about like, oh my God, look, it's up in the right numbers, but more just like a representation of you as an operator. So without knowing the details, that's kind of what I'd say. Let's see, Ganesh. How are you, man?
Hey, Jason, how's it going?
Good. What can I help you with?
I wanted to ask, so you've got this list, and if you had, obviously you just mentioned about doing the ask and going that way to get intro, but in terms of efficiency, if I've got 100 people that I want to connect and I don't know them, do you see much difference in terms of if I just not nice, short, succinct, cold email to explain what it is?
I'm not even going to let you finish. Massive difference. Really? Difference. Okay. Yeah. Cold emails work. They do, but the conversion rate is incredibly low. And even if they do work, this is what I'll tell you is, I don't know if the essay is written yet, but I'm working on an essay where the first impression of the way an investor discovers you is the first impression of you. And I can't tell you how much that colors their view of everything. So the difference between them finding out about you because you cold emailed them in a nice way versus, Daniel Downs, a founder that they really respect, saying, hey, met this guy, Ganesh, like even this, hey, met this entrepreneur, Ganesh. I was kind of intrigued by him. You should meet him. Versus Jason Ye saying like, I love this founder, like talk to him. And then your pitch afterwards is exactly the same. I can't tell you how different it will feel to the investor. And so there is going to be this trade-off between effort putting in to like find the right connections versus like, it's just going to take me like so long to jump 3 steps in order to get the introduction. But what I tell people is like, put in the effort. Like, this is why I tell people, you may think you're fundraising, but I actually think you're in like the prep fundraising phase, because you will have a better chance of doing well if you prep and like try to work on this than just saying I'm raising and sending 100 cold outreaches. There's always this stopping point too, where you're like, okay, the effort in to get these warm connections into those last 20% of investors is not going to pay off. So I'm going to cold outreach. There are great cold templates that I've put out in the world at some point. So I never say don't cold outreach, but I'd always say like put in the effort to get some warms. Okay.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks.
Yep. Let's go with, I see next on the list, Daniel. Hey man.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing well.
I'd love to hear your questions too.
Yeah. So I just have a very brief tactical question.
Sure.
This is not my first rodeo. It's actually my second startup, raised on my prior startup.
Yep.
This is my first RUV. And so we are going through the RUV process.
Just so everyone knows, she's talking about a roll-up vehicle, I think. Yep.
Yes. So the technical question on the RUV front, how would you apply your LinkedIn framework or another search framework for finding RUV communities or angel groups that are populated by people who are comfortable with RUVs? For reference, RUV Alliance, already on my radar, got the angel list portion, got the data room portion. Everything's already built for institutionals, but there's got to be groups out there that do what RUV Alliance does, but are just not known to me. And I was wondering if you knew.
Yeah, I mean, I don't actually think the process is all that different. It's just how seamlessly they can invest. So I would honestly, like, if that's what you're trying to do, I would just continue to look at angel investors. Like, if you search angel investors, those are the type of people that will look at the momentum you have, look at the existing investors you have, and join a roll-up vehicle. I actually don't even know what RUV Alliance is, but I assume they're just like any other like angel group. It just, they're branding it alongside a new product that AngelList has. And I'll point out too, like, I'm glad, Daniel, that you mentioned that you're a second-time founder and you've raised before. In my experience, people get through fundraises, just for everyone still here, whether you've raised or you haven't raised, people get through fundraises and find out that there are better ways to do it. So like, don't feel like because you don't know how to do this, you're weird. Don't feel like if you've already raised once before and then you're looking for more information that's weird. It's like, it's such a black box that this is why we do these events, because like people need to learn more and more about how to get this better, tighter, more efficient. Okay. Thanks, Dan. Gustavo, would love to hear your question too.
Okay. Hello, Jason. Thanks for taking the time. Well, I written down the question, but well, right now we haven't started to fundraise yet, actually, but we're seeing some investors reaching out to us because well, they saw they saw us on Crunchbase or something like that.
Great.
And then they have been reaching us. How much time do I really should spend with them? Because right now we're actually more focused on building the product. Yeah. We're pre-revenue, so even though we do have or deck, well, we don't have much traction to show up and that kind of thing. So I'm still trying to figure out how much time should on.
So obviously it depends on what your runway is and when you think you need to go raise, but you're in a great situation. Like this is the mindset that you're actually trying to get in always, which is you don't care or you don't need to talk to them. And so if you can continue that dynamic all the way through when you're actually raising and in the back of your head, you do care, you'll do better. So my recommendation for you is to push them off and say like, hey, really be polite. Be like, I really appreciate the interest. We have so much going on right now. And by the way, this is your way of kind of like flexing and showing them progress. And like, we have so much going on. We want to take calls with investors. I've done a bunch have reached out, but we've told all of them that we're, you know, I don't even really want to spend casual time just yet. If you can wait until next month, I think I'm going to find a day to just do some meet and greets with some investors, and not pitch yet. But like, if you're open to that, you know, here's a Calendly and give them. So that's when you start flipping the power dynamic where you're saying, look, lots of people are doing this. Maybe not a lot. Maybe it's just only them, but like, they don't need to know that. So like, oh, you know, investors have been showing interest. Can't really do this month, but I set aside a day where I can do investor relations stuff. Like, it shows a lot of foresight and it shows a lot of interest in the community, and push them to a date in the future. And that way, now you're kind of like dictating the power dynamic versus them. It's a big mind fuck and very effective.
Okay.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gustavo. Raul, hey, it looks like you got your hand raised. Are you still driving?
No, thank you. No, I've finally made it home. Sorry, I couldn't participate wholly, but this has been great. I had a question, actually, follow up with Gustavo's question.
Sure.
He said that they're being found through Crunchbase. I have been using Crunchbase as a way to build the investor board, but not so kind of gathering information from there to. But I was totally unaware that you could actually be on Crunchbase as a company, even if you're in a very early stage.
Yeah, you can submit information for a company and put yourself as executives. It's helpful. It can be helpful when people are searching for, or like if they hear about your company and want to learn a little bit more about you, you can put some sort of credible references in there. It can be helpful.
Okay, so it's somewhat a parallel to a LinkedIn, and that would function the same way, basically.
Somewhat. Like Crunchbase lets you upload your own profiles, like your own entrepreneurial profiles, and then create companies in there as well.
Okay.
Great.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Raul. Of course. Leticia, would love to see if I can help.
Hi, Jason. Thank you. I think I might be the only one speaking from Brazil.
Oh, muito bom.
Olha só. So I wanted to go back to the pitch part and ask you a little bit more about how to deal with a pitch that you send over.
Say it again. That is what?
A pitch deck that you send over.
Oh, sent over, yeah.
Yeah, like in which case, like I was advised to add more information to it, as opposed to like having just one version of it that you send regardless of, you know, you presenting or sending over by email.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of different approaches to this. There are a couple things that I think, and like, there's not one way to do it, but if you think about these philosophies, I believe that decks are always better with a talk track on top of it. And so like, my preference is that a deck gets sent, a version of a deck gets sent like the day before a meeting. Like, this is how I do it perfectly, is I'd send a deck over the day before a meeting to like make sure that they're smart enough where they can ask questions, but not so long that they're like stewing on it, so that when you get into it, you can kind of give that talk track. And then once that's done, yeah, like if they're interested in moving forward, you can send them the deck that also has appendix slides and a lot of additional detail. That's kind of the phasing out process that I would do. Mark Suster has this blog post about when you give investors more data, and it's this idea of like, there are like so many different beliefs and systems out there, but he believes that like, a lot of investors will just be like, yeah, send the deck over, and not really be interested. You don't really want to send more, in my opinion, I agree with him. You don't really want to send all this information over to investors that are just like, you know, pulling your chain and not actually interested. So I would kind of read the room and see how excited people are before you send out more information. Does that answer your question? I'm not sure exactly.
Yeah, it helps. Thank you.
Oh, okay, fantastic. All right. It sounds like we've gotten to the, Augustine, do you have one more question? We'll do one last question and then close it up.
If we have time, Jason, appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you. Just your thoughts on investors' newsletters. We've kind of built up some investors we've been talking to. We were starting to put together a newsletter.
Yeah.
Of course, it's a good practice. How public should your information be in this newsletters? Of course, not too worried about competition reading them, but how much information should you be sharing with people that have not invested yet?
So there are a lot of different schools of thought around this. It's funny. Jonathan and I were talking about whether or not I put the slide in about like showing that two different experts can have completely different approaches to things. But I'll share that, like, by the way. So take everything with a grain of salt, ask additional context questions. But my belief is kind of what I was telling Leticia, which is like, you want to control the narrative. You want to control the narrative as much as possible. And that's why I actually tell people, if you want to send things out to potential investors, I wouldn't put them on your monthly investor update. There are exceptions to this rule. The company Levels, Sam Korkos, if you want to look him up, he's a machine and he does things a very different way, but he's incredibly transparent. But that's also because he's an incredible operator. So everything is amazing to see. For you, I wouldn't do a monthly update where everyone was on it. I think newsletters are fine because newsletters don't have to go out on a regular basis. You can kind of like, when you have a good story to tell a good story, tell a good story when it goes out. And so, look, I think being, your question of what you should share, I think you should share what makes a substantially good short story and show progress from the last newsletter update. In general, like, sharing too much is not, I don't think, too much of an issue. Like, so just err on the side of telling a great story. Cool. All right, guys, Jonathan has been sending out, oh, cool. Yeah. You actually might want to listen to this episode of Funded, which Jonathan listened to. So it was a 2-part episode where Sam talks about his fundraising strategy, which is insane. It's good for inspiration. I think not everyone can actually execute on the strategy that he used. But look, we are going to close this all out. Thank you so much for staying so long, the last 24 of you. Again, this Sunday is when our last part of our 3-part series comes up. So I'd love to see you guys there. Please register either way if you think that time isn't going to work for you, because registrants will get additional information. But thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Jason.